Hi, welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and as always, I love your company. What a month it's been in bonsai. If you haven't seen socials, you won't know, but I've been travelling around this beautiful country of ours, and I seriously love it. It's fantastic. I can't tell you the buzz I get from meeting new people and their bonsai, from helping to potentially create new bonsai from scratch as well when someone brings something new to a workshop, or I get to do a demonstration on something. But I love so much just getting around this beautiful country of ours and seeing different parts of it and different climates, and just getting a feel for we are such a big nation, and we're so diverse, and these trees that we shove into these little pots, they thrive in so many different areas. They seem to do so well. So it's lovely to see that, I take it very seriously that the advice that I offer or the comments that I make, they don't always apply to everywhere. They definitely don't. I get that. And everyone listening to this podcast should know that as well, that your microclimate, the area where you live, there needs to be adjustments with timings, with amounts, with, when you start certain things, when you stop certain things, when the growing period starts, when it stops, and you need to make adjustments in that space. But I love it that we can talk about the reason why things happen and get an understanding for, things like, candle cutting on pines has been a lot that's been talked about for me lately. It's like, what's the timing of it? And I say, well, for me, in my little world, it's now. But giving people the understanding of why we do it and why I pick that date allows them to sit there and think, well, if that's the reason, then my date for that would be a little bit earlier, or it would be a little bit later. And I love it. It's that whole, knowledge is power sort of thing. And if you don't know, you don't know. But passing on all this information through these meetings that I get to do, and demos and workshops and all that sort of stuff around different parts of Australia, regional New South Wales is the majority of what I've done, as well as on the border up at Albury-Wodonga. It's been fantastic. So the clubs that had me on board, thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated, and to everyone that I met, you're all legends. But one thing I do find when I am travelling is that I get a really sore neck. And the reason for that is every time I drive, my head swivels on and says, oh, look at that tree. And I'm sort of, looking out the steering wheel, pointing at a tree. Look at that tree out there in that field. Like, look how magnificent it is. The nabari, the trunk, the structure. That's the perfect tree. And then, 5 minutes down the road, oh, look at that one out the other side. So my head's constantly going from one to the other. But one thing that I truly love is when you get off the highway and you get into these towns that are off the track, that are old historical towns, and you see some of the beautiful trees that were planted such a long time ago by people with such a vision. It sort of makes the hair stand up on my arms when I see them. It's like that is magnificent. Like, it's been so cared for over such a long period of time, and it really provides a lot of inspiration to me. That, wild trees are one thing, they give me inspiration, but to see a well-maintained, magnificent, beautifully structured old tree in an area where a town's built around it, that it's loved by everyone around it. That's truly amazing. But anyway, let's get back to the podcast now. I've had my little rant. So what I want to talk about in this one is my bonsai life on the road for a little bit. Talk about some stories that I've come across and people that I've met and all that sort of stuff. And then I'm going to talk about what my experience was doing demonstrations recently, because I had some time between the demos, and it's like, okay, well, let's maybe help someone, or let's reiterate the process that I go through to find a tree. When you get a blob of foliage put in front of you, let's talk about that. What's my approach? What do I think of? What are my considerations before I start chopping things off? Just to open it up a little bit. That helps. And I think it'll help everybody when you do get a new piece of material in front of you, or you've got that tree in your collection that you look at and go, I just don't know where to start. So hopefully that can help. So should be an interesting podcast. So let's get into it. All right, Right, so this is from my bonsai life on the road, which I can't tell you how much I love getting out and about in the camper van and travelling around the countryside and meeting different people and seeing different things. But anyway, I'll start with a story. Now, some new friends of ours, Scott and Trish and their daughter Gab in Taree, listeners to the podcast. So hello everybody. We were sitting down one night after a great day, great session, having a few quiet ales and having a talk, and it got brought up by Gab saying, "When does bonsai become a cult?" And it's actually I've been laughing about it ever since, because it's so true. When you think about bonsai, you know, an image comes to your head. You'll see a certain tree in a pot, and for me that image is a beautiful black pine in a pot. It's always the same. Whenever I hear the word bonsai, it's like bang, there it is. You know, it's either that or it's my big melaleuca. That they're the two trees that always come into my mind when the word bonsai comes up. But when you consider an outsider to our beautiful little world that we have, that possibly isn't hands on. They see them, they may be exposed to them, or they come across them. When you break it down and they're sitting around a table with us and we talk about Nabari, or we talk about Shari or gins, or we're talking about wiring trees, or we're talking about using raffia to bend a branch. Those terms, when you aren't part of this world, must just seem so foreign. Like we have a secret handshake to enter the room on. You know, there's this backhanded shuffle when we pass things to each other so other people don't see them, and it's really, really interesting to know, to see that. You know, I come across it a lot with a lot of people, especially partners of people that maybe do stuff with me. They walk in and just shake their heads because we're talking this gibberish that doesn't seem to make sense, but it's cool. Like I love it because it's part of who we are. You know, it's part of the knickknacks of bonsai, and having all this, you know, these words, this vernacular that we use, that the terms and the approach that we use. You know, when you're new to it, it sort of like seems a bit foreign. But as you start to pick these things up, it makes it so much easier to, you know, you talk about Nabari. We all know. You know that Nabari is the base of the tree, the root spread at the flare and the base of the tree. It's so much easier to say Nabari and everyone goes, yep, bang, know exactly what you're talking about, than to know or think about all these other things. So we look at a new tree and we squat down. We get on our haunches and we look up at this little tree in a pot, and people from a distance must look at it and go, you're praying to it? What's the go with that? Well, you can't see it from back here. You have to get up close and personal to it. But it's what we do. We get in there and we look up at the branches, and you know, we study foliage, and we consider shading and positioning of the trunk and the movement and line of the trunk. And it seriously is like we're obsessed, which we are to a certain extent, absolutely obsessed, and our life revolves around these little trees in tiny little pots, and how we can improve them, and what the next step is, and how we develop them, and how we take them from where they are now to somewhere in 20 years' time. So it does become that bit of a cult. But another part is, you know, another thing that got raised in the conversation was, are we bonsai hoarders? Now, yep, everyone sit on their hands. Don't put your hands up and admit to that, because I'm pretty sure that that's the same for all of us. We're all in that boat where we look around our yard, me included, but I'm not putting my hand up, and I won't admit it publicly. But we've all got those trees in our collection where we look at them and think, you know, geez. And then you come across one. You go to a sale day, you go to a nursery, there's a bargain bin, or and this is the common one, you're cutting a tree and you go, oh, those cuttings would be great. or you walk past a cone and go, oh, I might just take those seeds. What are you going to do with another 100 trees? Like, you take all these cuttings. Are they special cuttings? Do they have a beautiful bit of movement? No, they're not. They're sort of 10 centimetres long. They're 100 years from being the butterfly, beautiful bonsai that we want. But we all do it. I still do it. I can't help myself. I'm working on a juniper that's got magnificent foliage, really beautiful, beautiful foliage. And I look and I think that's amazing. And as I'm cutting things off and shaping it, the thought going through my head is, yep, that was the right cut to make. But, wouldn't that be a nice cutting? I might just put that in that pile up there and put in some water just so it can last until I finish this session with the tree. And then I'll go through and I'll pot it up. I think that being a bonsai enthusiast, I think if you're listening to this podcast and you're 7 seasons deep, then you're a bonsai enthusiast. Then you're a bonsai hoarder. But wear it proudly. Make a shirt out of it and walk around the street, because it's what we all are. I don't think there's anybody that I've met. They may start with 1 or 2 trees, 1 or 2 turns into about 10, and 10 suddenly explodes into God knows how many, and I don't like to count anymore. And it's a question that I don't like to ask people. It's sort of like, I don't go, how many bonsai have you got? It's, okay, roughly how many trees have you got? What sort of range? I just want to get a feel. Are you a 10? Are you a 50? Or 100? Are you 100 plus? Because once you breach that limit of 100 trees in the collection, you've run out of space in the backyard and you're looking to hire a farm somewhere to store your trees. But you get to a point where it's too much to count, and you don't want to know. You get to a point where you won't want that answer being given to you. And the last thing I want to see is someone walking through my yard with their finger going 1, 2, 3, because then I'll have a number and I'll have a sleepless night trying to work out what the hell it is that I'm going to be doing about it. The other thing that makes us a bit of a cult, and this is definitely something that I picked up while I was out and about in the last month or so. We talk a lot about fertilizing. For people who seem to enjoy an artistic side of the world, we talk a hell of a lot about putting fertilizer on trees, which, a hand on heart, that warms my heart, because I've had a feeling for a long time ago, I had a feeling for a very long period of time that's probably the one thing that I came across a lot of people that would not fertilize anywhere near what they should do. It was always a mild fertilizer here or there. It was more the pat on the back was given for the fact that they'd been to a hardware store and they'd bought a bottle of liquid fertilizer, and it may have been given to the trees once during spring. It's like, yes, I fertilize my trees. Whereas now I feel that, and hopefully, I'm a small part, or this podcast is a small part in pushing that, but hopefully it's a global thing that everybody's focusing on now and passing down the line. You need to fertilize your trees. You need to be on top of these trees. You need to make them strong and healthy. You need to, focus not on the top, focus on the bottom, focus on the root system. Get that part right, and the rest of it will just happen. It works by itself. You'll have far more options if you are fertilizing and strengthening your trees. And you'll have a lot less issues with your trees, like pests and disease and all those things seem to, slide away. We're not sitting there talking about, the constant application of pesticides, because it's so common now to have people say to me, I really don't need to use it. It may be every now and then, but the trees are great. Have a look at them. Look how healthy they are. Perfect. Trees have a natural defense for these things. Trees don't want to be susceptible. They won't last long term if they're susceptible to all these things. So this talk that we have about fertilizer is so healthy and so strong, and it's now about the extra 1 or 2% that people can get out of their fertilizing, as opposed to, okay, I don't fertilize, I've got to start it, which is so good for me. And it's different. Not everyone does the same thing, and not everyone has to do the same thing. That's not what I'm saying. There's no one perfect method. There's a perfect method for you in your environment with your conditions that you have to deal with. I've got it at the moment with my tea bags that, I'm just ready to put on another fresh batch for the last run before we head towards summer. But the previous batch has been flogged by birds, by rats, by possums, by dogs in my house. And anyone that's put out tea bags of fertilizer, especially if they've got blood and bone in them, know that they are like a tasty little treat for any dog that can get near them. And not everyone can put up electric fences to keep their dogs away from their trees. But geez, it would be nice. I tell you, I would consider that, because the impact of this fertilizer on a dog's digestive system is not good. If you haven't experienced it, then good on you. If you have, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and it's disastrous. So, I think the fact that we are talking about it and we are looking at different ways and trying slightly different methods and considering different things, and then you'll get to the point within your own space that you'll go, you know what, that's perfect. And then you become part of the conversation. People will ask you, hey, your trees look fantastic. What are you doing for fertilizing? And you can go, well, in my yard, I do this. But be mindful that your perfect fertilizing scenario isn't going to be someone else's perfect fertilizing scenario. You're just part of the conversation. And that's what I love is, when I travel, I get asked about it a lot. And it's like, well, for me, I do this. And someone will say, yeah, but I can't because of whatever. It's like, cool. You don't have to. That's definitely not what I'm saying. So what other things have you considered? And then we just talk about it and we go through the different range. There's, things can always be improved. Things can be made better until they hit the perfect sweet spot in your yard. And that can be a range of different things. There's so many different products out there. There's so much that we can do with our trees. As long as we're talking about it, as long as you're doing it, as long as it's not that once a year hit for your trees expecting miracles to happen in that little short space, then I think that's worked. The other part about this cult thing, which makes me laugh, we get together for our monthly meetings. we seriously convene, and we'll bring along our little trees and we'll show them to others, as we should. I'm not mocking this, but it just, I hadn't sat back and thought about it being a cult until it was raised to me that, hey, you do have your regular meetings. You'll go in it. You'll have a president. You'll have a treasurer. You'll have your little trees put on display. People will get awards for it on a monthly basis. You'll have someone like me come along and do presentations, and you'll all sit there and go, oh, right, okay, yeah. So, you've got someone standing up talking to you about bonsai. It's seriously, look up definition of cult, and I reckon they're not far off the mark. That it's funny. It's really good. But anyway, I'm just joking. I think that we don't sit in circles and chant. Well, not yet. Well, the clubs that I've been to don't. Maybe a few do, but we're part of a. Let's not use the word cult. Let's use the word family, because that's what I think we are around this magnificent country that we've got. That makes me so bloody proud of our bonsai and where we're going with it, and that I see things from Western Australia where a mate takes out the best in show on a tree that he's worked on with another mate, and it's like, how good's that? Like, seriously, all this hard work, all the things that are being done around the traps, and that people are working so hard towards to bring our level of bonsai to the best in the world with our natives, with our exotics, with everything. Whether it's a pine and a juniper, or it's a melaleuca or a callistemon, or whatever it is, we've got so much skill and dedication and passion in Australia that it's fantastic. It's brilliant. So anyway, let's move on, and I'll get into the next section of the podcast. I've talked before about finding the bonsai within, and this is just a refresher, I suppose, because it's front of mind. When I look at trees, there's certain things that you do. I wouldn't say instinctively is the right word, but you get a gut feel for things. Like, I do. I'll talk about me. I get a gut feel for things that happen when I look at raw material and think, yep, okay, this is what's going to happen. But it's not acceptable for me to not be able to verbalize these things and to explain and to pass on the information. Doing it's one thing, and that's fantastic. Some people are great artists, but for me, I find that passing on this information may just help lift a bit of a veil, or it may have it where somebody who listens to this or hears me at a demonstration may suddenly go, oh, that's what that is. And you don't have to take on board every single piece of it. And I know early in my my bonsai life, I found it extremely frustrating to go along and see a demonstration and look at someone, grab a tree, and suddenly within the first 3 seconds they've made massive cuts with branches, which is all dramatic, and everyone goes, "Oh, wow, look at that!" But it's like, how did you get to that point? How did you know to cut those off? Like, what part of your world makes you think that that's where this tree is going to go? And I always found that it really extremely frustrating that there wasn't a process that people went through, that there wasn't some kind of a system, for instance, that you can not follow, but that can be explained to me. And I worked so hard and thought about that so much in my early days, and still to this day, that I like to then talk about. And if you've ever done anything with me, you'll know that this is a way that I sort of work, that I'll talk about things as I do them, and I'll say, okay, rather than just walking in and taking a 10-foot pine and cutting it down so it ends up being 50, 60 centimeters tall, and everyone going, well, that's cool, but why did you cut there? What's going to happen with the apex? What about the first branch? What about what's happening here and there? So I found it really important for me when I was evolving this sort of bonsai education side of things, or this passing on of information, that I sat there and went, okay, I'm looking at a tree. Get a pen and paper out beside me. All right, what are you looking at? What's the first thing that comes across your mind? And for me, the first thing that was on my list was to find a trunk line. Now, a lot of people will say, look at the nabari and start at the very base of the tree. Like, look at the root system, because that's something you can't change. That's true. But when I look at a large tree, the nabari is a consideration, but that's a little bit further for me. My first thing is to find a trunk line. So I'll look at the movement of a trunk, and I try and always work with a consistency of movement. For instance, if the lower bend is let's say 20 centimeters on an arc, then the next part of the movement of the tree, I'll try and have it so it's a bit less than that, maybe sort of 15, but still the same feel of movement. I don't want it super aggressive movement, then a straight peg, and then super aggressive movement. It's got to all work together. So when I'm looking at a trunk or a tree, I'm following it, going, okay, so if it moves, for instance, if it moves and arcs out to the left and then comes back to the right, then I want to sort of maybe think, do I want to continue out to the right-hand side a little bit and then come back to the left, or do I want to come to the front, or I want to go to the back? Like, where's the natural flow of this tree? And I'll try and have it where there might be cuts that get made on that tree at that point to help encourage the movement. Like, let's say it arcs out 20 centimeters to the left, but then straight above that is a bean pole. It goes for a meter, dead straight and thick and boring. Well, it's okay. Well, around about that point there, to get my trunk line to move, I need to cut that off. I don't want that inconsistency of trunk movement from that point. I want to have it so it continues. So then my trunk line consideration suddenly goes, okay, well, if I cut that off, is there a branch that I can take, and then that becomes the new trunk line? Can I wire something? Can I bring it up? Can I continue the movement that I've got, or the shaping that I've got in that trunk line further by using a branch? So that leads me to the second thing. The second thing I look for when I'm designing a tree is the taper. When I'm doing a demo, it's like, okay, so I want to go from thicker to thinner everywhere. I want to do that on the branches. I want to do it on the trunk. Taper is super important to get a realistic bonsai. If you look at a tree that's got sort of like I call it a sausage, the same thickness all the way up to the apex, it doesn't have the attraction. Well, for me anyway, it doesn't have the attraction as a tree that steps down, thicker at the base, thinner in the middle, and lighter at the top. So when I'm designing a tree, I'll always do that. I should have said that the most important thing I do when I'm working on someone else's tree is talk to the owner. Is talk to the person who's provided the material, and I'll give them a heads up and say, hey, what sort of size tree are you thinking? Do you want it to be a meter tall? Are you thinking 10 centimeters tall? Like, what's in your head? And before I do something major, like if I'm going to remove a massive bulk I'll say to them, look, I'm potentially looking at something like this. Before I get up in front of everybody and, the chainsaw comes out, I'll say, look, are you okay if this sort of comes off and this is going to be the feel for the tree, overall? So I get buy-in and approval almost from somebody who's providing the material, because it's really important that everybody understands that once this tree's been designed, unless it's being auctioned off, it's going back home to the person who's grown this thing. And I absolutely respect that someone has put a lot of time into material that gets provided to demonstrators. So I want them to have a tree that they're proud of and that they're going to love and that they can develop further themselves because they've got buy-in on it, saying, yeah, I really love that. If someone said to me, okay, I want this to be I want this to be windswept, we might have words, but it would be definitely something that I'll take into consideration, because they've looked at the tree for a very long period of time and they've looked at it a certain way, and they've always seen maybe a vision of, hey, look, I really like this part of the tree, but if that part of the tree is the first part that I'm going to cut off, well, then they fall out of love with it. What's the point? No, there's zero purpose in doing that, because we all have to love the trees that are on our bench. Otherwise, we're not going to look after them the way we should do, and the tree's not going to live forever. It's not going to become the bonsai that it deserves to be. So anyway, so I do look for taper in everything that I do. The other thing that I'll do is what I call pot belly avoidance. And this is where we start moving further back down the tree. So I've focused on the trunk line. I've worked out where I'm going to get my taper and start reducing the thickness of that trunk line. At this stage, I'm not really considering branch placement or anything like that. That's down the track. There's techniques that we can use, grafting and thread grafting and all that sort of stuff to develop branches in different places, but we really can't do much about the trunk line. So then I start working further back down. Once I've got all those things locked off, I've got, my approximate height that I'm working to based on the taper that I'm choosing. I've got my movement of the trunk. Then I start looking at the little pot belly that the tree's got, which is super common. It's that bulging. The pigeon breast is another word for it, but little pot belly, that's the beer belly that sticks out on the tree, that you sort of come up and it looks like it tucks under towards the nabari, to the base of the tree. I'll try and avoid that. So, then I start making considerations on that trunk line. I've got pretty much what I think is the front of the tree, but there can be a slight angle change. Maybe I can rotate it anti-clockwise 15 degrees, or I can go clockwise 20 degrees, still keep the sort of movement and direction of the trunk that I want, still keep the taper that I'm going to get, but suddenly that pot belly that I've got can start to move out of line, and it becomes an interesting bottom section of the tree as opposed to this bulge that's coming towards me. So then comes the really important part of this, is the flow and movement of the tree. I've talked about flow and movement before, but flow of the tree is it's the vibe. it's where the tree's going. Is it sort of starting going left and then coming back towards the right and then going back to left, then back to the right a little bit more, and is it flowing out to the right hand side ultimately, or does it flow out to the left? Because that determines for me where I want which side I want, or where I'm going to place my key branch. Not my first branch, but my key branch, the directional branch. And it also is going to force me to do a certain positioning on the apex of the tree. So once I've got my trunk line, I've got my taper, I've eliminated the pot belly, or made it as best as I possibly can, then I start thinking about, is it a left flowing tree? Is it a right flowing tree? Is it a strong flow to the right? Is it a strong flow to the left? Is it mild flow? Is it very static? Is it a formal upright? Like, what am I trying to achieve with this tree before I start really doing anything on this tree? These are the thoughts that go through my head, and then I start verbalizing and putting them into place, saying, okay, so I'm cutting this because I'm helping with the taper. I'm cutting here because I've set my top of the tree. I'm keeping this as my first or my key branch because I want this tree to flow towards the right-hand side. Now, if that's flowing towards the right-hand side, then my apex needs to be structured like this to continue that movement down that flow down the right-hand side of the tree, or the left-hand side, whatever it is. And then from there, when it comes to branch placement and positioning and length of those branches, it all sort of falls into line, because I've got the movement of the trunk, I've got my taper, I've got my flow so I can then start picking branches and eliminating things based on that, saying, okay, well, if my key branch is to the right-hand side, then really this one on the left-hand side, I don't want that competing with it. So I can either eliminate or I can shorten. I can start to bring that in, and I can start to, compact one side of the tree, and I can start to open up and start using things like, terms like negative space in the design, and it all sort of starts to make sense as to why you're doing things, because you've sort of ticked a few key boxes, and it might not be that the trunk line that I've chosen is for everybody. It doesn't have to be. It's got to be for you as the person designing it. There's always alternatives. There's always different ways to go about things, but as long as you can tick these boxes, then I think that you're in a pretty good place. The next thing I start looking at is the future development options, which is super important when I am doing a demo. It's not about perfection then and on the spot making it, compromising things and maybe, spaghettiing branches and all that sort of stuff. What I work on is that good structure is good bonsai approach. And I start looking, saying, okay, well, in this section, we've got some nice small little buds, but they're not strong enough to survive by themselves. So I'm going to keep foliage further out on that branch as a sap drawer to make sure that those little buds get stronger. But then as part of the future plan for this, it would be as those buds get strong enough and they start drawing sap themselves and start to really push and develop, then that longer section gets cut back. So I think it's really important not to make compromises for the here and now, but to have it so this tree that you've worked on has got a next step. It doesn't then suddenly get home from the demo and those buds start to die, and like the key branch that was, so important that everyone applauds and goes, yeah, that looks great, fantastic, good job, suddenly dies. It's like, okay, so now when this tree next comes for presentation or to talk about somewhere down the track, or when I'm next in that club, maybe in a year or 2 years' time, I can hold my head high because that tree is going to take that next step forward safely. It's not going to be brought into me and suddenly said, well, I know you did all this, but that died, and suddenly I had to redesign it and it's a completely different tree. It's like I feel very confident walking out of any of these things to go, you know what, I haven't compromised anything to make me look good. I've got that tree as if it was my own, and I've got it ready to take the next step, which is the super important part. And there's part of the encouragement for everybody listening is to say that when you are working on these trees yourself and you've got your own trees, don't worry about the Instagram moment now. It's not about that. It's, make compromises for the health of the tree to make sure that next time it's even better when you take that photo and it looks $1 million. That's what you want. It's looking perfect in the future. It's not looking perfect now. Anyway, but I always want to make sure that I clear the potential outcome with the owner of the tree. And if you're the owner of the tree and you're doing it, make a pact with yourself. Before you start hacking away and suddenly you look at the tree and go, well, there's nothing left. Okay, well, what do I do now? Make a pact with yourself that you're going to make compromises. You're going to have things there maybe for later on to consider. Use a flagging system. There might be, you might have a cut site where you've got 3 or 4 tiny little buds starting to grow. You're only going to keep one of them at that point. But is it going to make a big difference letting all 3 grow for now? Like, or, maybe they're 10 centimeters long each. Like one's sort of to the right, one's in the middle, one's to the left. Which one's the ideal one? Are they all going to grow at the same rate? Is the tree naturally going to let 1 or 2 of them die anyway? Has the tree already made that decision for you? So removing something like that now may not be the best thing. Let it harden up, let it get a bit woody, maybe get a year down the track, then come in and go, right, this one's the best one. It's the one on the left side is the one seriously with my design that looks beautiful, and it's the strongest, it's the nicest, it's got the best ramification, the growth's in the closest on that one, that's the one I'm going to keep. Then cut off the other 2. You're not going to get massive swelling or destruction of design in the short term. It's actually going to be far better for the longer term to make that decision a little bit later down the track. So anyway, that's the process I go through when I do demos. I do love to make beautiful trees, and most times that's possible. Other times you're building a skeleton, you're building a framework, you're allowing for the future. You're not doing something that looks great now and the person then gets it home and goes, well, there's now 400 branches all coming from the one spot. Yeah, sure, it's a nice full silhouette that's been pruned to look pretty, but I've got all this disastrous structure in here. How do I deal with that? And really, you've done nothing to help that person or that bonsai become what it can be. So they're the things that go through my little nut brain when I'm doing demos anyway. All right, well, as a bit of a wrap up for the podcast, thank you again for listening. If you've made it this far, it's native repotting time for me. Australian natives. I have a big line just outside where I'm recording the podcast in my workshop, where as soon as I sort of hit the go button on this, that's exactly what I'm doing. I am starting to work with them, and just there's lots of different information about timing on repotting natives, which is why I thought I'd talk about it now. So it's late-ish into spring, where the trees are all starting to look like they're growing. The weather patterns around Australia have been ridiculous. One weather system rolls through where, down south where I am in Melbourne, and we get, 100 odd k an hour winds and freezing cold weather, suddenly turns into near 40 degrees in Sydney, just slightly north, and now it's being smashed up in Brisbane as well. One huge system smashed, from all its way from sort of South Australia right the way across to the northern part of Australia, northeastern part. So it's crazy. But what I was going to get to with that in mind was that it's a volatile time with the weather, and for me with repotting, the aftercare is the key. Especially for natives, like at this time, when I'm doing my exotics and it's sort of that latter part of winter, it's maybe not quite as disastrous. We're certainly not getting 40-degree days, but 40-degree days on a freshly repotted tree can be, a major consequence to their future longevity, or even these strong hot winds. Doesn't need to be super hot either. It's just got to be dry. Can have an impact when you've affected the tree's transpiration system by cutting its roots and putting it through shock and whatever. So anyway, the aftercare is super important with them. I know that I'll be protecting mine for about a good 3 weeks afterwards into a really sheltered spot, as I do with all of my trees. Natives are no different. But there's I don't normally talk about a lot of brands on the podcast, but there's lots of different things you can get, but one that I use, which I pick up from major hardware stores available everywhere, is Plant Starter, which I use for shock after repotting. That I find is fantastic. It works really well. It's very, very small dosage for repotting. Follow the instructions, of course. Whenever you use any chemicals supplied by anybody, I don't care what advice you get. Always use the manufacturer's specified levels. Don't exceed it. It's not safe, but I think that for me, it's one of these things I use quite regularly, especially, as I said, especially with natives, especially with the sensitive natives post repotting, maybe my Banksias, that sort of thing. But I find that you can't. It's one of these things you can't put your finger on the result, but the trees are happy and they don't suffer and they keep moving forward after repotting. So for me, it's part of my regime that I use, and I find that it works. So therefore, I pass it on through something like this podcast to everyone listening. That if it's something you want to consider, of course, do your own homework and check it all out. But for me, it's something that I use and that I trust, and that when I'm asked about, I recommend. As I said, there's 1,000,001 different products. There's a lot of different things that I get told about. But for me, I've always found this one works just great, and I've never had a setback after using it. So it may be different for each person listening, but it is something that I want to pass on. Another thing that we're heading into is that, as I talked about, the final fertilizing regime. If you do have pines, then get on it. You really, whatever your regime is, continue it. Keep pumping it into them. We've got really another month or so left before we start to look at some serious work on decandling of black pines. If you are looking at candle cutting, your trees, the single flush or, whatever, however you want to categorise them, the Scots Pines, Mugos, Radiatas, that sort of thing, then fertilising now is really good because we've got to boost the tree's strength as well before we go through and do all that serious work on them. So it's just a gentle reminder that we've got to stay on top of things. Anyway, thanks for listening in. As always, I promise you I'll be back next week with another episode. I was pushed to try and do, 3 episodes, 4 episodes a week. That ain't going to happen. A lot goes into these podcasts, and I truly love the subscribers that contribute to the show. So if you are thinking it's a great podcast or you do enjoy it, please consider becoming a subscriber because it adds to the continuity of this program. So thank you for your support. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the kind words that I receive, and give your trees a cuddle for me. Until next time, as always, happy bonsai.